There's room for everyone in whisky.
So growing up in Speyside, you saw whisky all around you from a young age. What was your perception of the whisky industry before you got into it yourself?
So I always thought of it as quite a rural agricultural product. Speyside has 60 or more distilleries, so you would have distilleries everywhere. But I also understood that it was quite internationally recognised. My mum is French, and my grandmother, who lived in France, she always wanted a bottle of whisky when we came to visit her. So I could see there was a lot of appeal just from the French market, but going through the airport as well, you'd always see lots of different Scotch whiskies.
And did you feel like it was always an industry you wanted to be part of, or did that realisation happen more gradually?
It happened more gradually. I went to university in Edinburgh and really enjoyed studying, kind of outside of the countryside, Speyside countryside. But then I did quite a lot of travelling, and that's where I started to see Scotch whisky was really quite highly regarded and appreciated. So that made me think, oh, maybe I could go back to Scotland, learn more about whisky and make this a career.
Yeah. So your career's taken you through distilleries, brands, now cask sales. How has your opinion of the industry sort of been shaped and changed as you've moved through that journey?
So I've been in whisky 12 years now, and mainly in export sales. So I've always had this element of travel and seeing what Scotch whiskies are out in different export markets. So I'd say that whether I've been working in a traditional distillery or a modern independent brand, there's always demand for Scotch whisky, and I found that working in it, it's a really welcoming place, and it's very well received internationally.
Yeah. So having worked across distilleries, independent brands, have you noticed the whisky industry becoming more open to new voices and new ways of doing things?
Yeah, I think it's definitely changed even in the decade or so I've worked in it. It's a tougher market now, economically. So I think brands are adapting to more entry-level products and also bringing in new consumers. So I think there's some more focus on maybe the marketing of whisky towards these newer consumers. And quite a good example of that is the Whisky Show London. So that's held by the Whisky Exchange, and they have just launched a whisky event for novices in whisky. So I think that's just a good example of the powerhouse retailer trying to bring in new consumers, new products, and I think I see that as a positive thing. It's just more variety, new faces to the industry, and making it all together, giving it a wider appeal.
Yeah, making it more accessible from that kind of grassroots up, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely.
So this collaboration brings together different forms of Scottish craftsmanship through the whisky, through the tartan, through us at Cask Trade bringing it together. Why was it important to you to get involved within the team with this collaboration?
So for me, a collaboration is, it should be something that's kind of natural, organic, and that it's bringing together different backgrounds and experiences to create an engaging story for a wide audience. So for me, it felt like it was something that went beyond just the whisky drinker. And I think the collaboration between fashion and distillery, and then a cask sales perspective, really brings together something that's quite unique as a bottling, but also as bringing together very different backgrounds of people working in the industry.
So part of the task in this collaboration was to pick the whisky that we bottled, and we have some lovely samples from Nc'nean here, and you were pivotal in selecting this sample. When we came to sample the whiskies, what were you looking for in a liquid that was worthy of being bottled for this collaboration?
So I think predominantly was looking for something that had a wide appeal beyond the kind of typical whisky drinker wanted something that would be, I guess, a crowd pleaser, but also something that had an edge and that was a little bit different. So when we think of Scotch whisky, traditionally we think of bourbon cask, sherry cask, peated whisky, those types of sort of more standard ideas. But tasting the range from Nc'nean, the samples were really varied. So we had bourbon cask, we had SDR, red wine casks, we had Tokai, and an Oloroso sherry cask as well. Having tasted all of them, I landed on the STR red wine cask, an 8-year-old whisky. And this one just, for me, it tasted delicious. It was very fruit forward, had a lot of depth to it. And I think also just the notion of STR red wine cask. So STR is shaved, toasted, recharred, and this method is used to accelerate the maturation of the whisky and then also give it more fruity flavours. And I think that whisky does exactly that. Also, the STR method was invented by a Scottish biologist and chemist called Jim Swan, who I believe was instrumental in the creation of Nc'nean distillery. So I think that gives it a really modern edge to really bring together the collaboration.
Nice. So in your role working with global bottlers all around the world, has that changed your perspective about Scotch whisky and just the general whisky market globally outside of Scotland?
Yes, definitely. I think globally Scotch whisky is recognised on such a high level. You've got markets that are very well established and mature, like France and Japan, that have been importing Scotch whisky for decades. Then you've got other markets that are emerging markets that are continuing to explore more Scotch whisky and different brands, like South Korea and Vietnam. So there's always some level of appreciation for Scotch whisky. And there are certain markets which I'm embarrassed to say have a better selection of Scotch whisky than in Scotland. So there's definitely a real sense of community and appreciation for Scotch whisky on a global level, which you can't see just living in Scotland. It's something that you've got to go out to the export markets and really experience, and the number of whisky bars and different types of whisky available in the shops. For example, in Japan and Taiwan, is just beyond expectation.
Yes. Nice. People outside of Scotland often associate whisky with kind of quite old-fashioned heritage and tradition. What is your opinion on sort of the evolving modern whisky culture and environment at the moment?
I think it's really welcoming. I've seen over the last 10 years, there are certain brands that are, marketing in quite a different way, but even just in terms of a wider appeal and not showing the typical old style heritage side of Scotch. I think there's a lot of whisky festivals and events that are really inclusive and attract tourism beyond the kind of traditional whisky drinker. One example is Speyside, which is the whisky festival on the Isle of Islay. That's a festival I've been to a few times, but it was, I think it was founded in the 80s with the principle of promoting Scottish culture and Gaelic heritage. And now fast forward to today, each of the distilleries has an open day where they have tastings, they have music, they have cultural activities, like family activities. So it's really a celebration of Scottish culture in a modern way, including the distilleries. Then you've got other events like the Dramathon, which I've done in Speyside, which is essentially a whisky marathon running through different distilleries in Speyside. That's been going for, I think, 10 years. And that's attracting tourism on a different level of it's a modern Scotch whisky culture, but it's also, expanding beyond the consumers. And that's something that I see as really positive and very much the modern landscape of whisky today.
Yeah. What kind of voices and stories do you want to see more of in the whisky market in the future?
So I always enjoy hearing about the people and the stories behind the distilleries and the brands. So I think it's important to get that across the very varied background of different types of people that come to the whisky industry. It can be a chemistry background, it can be a sales background, a languages background. It's not about being in whisky to begin with. I think that's something that's really welcoming about whisky, and it is very much a community. So in terms of new voices and new expressions of whisky that I'd like to see, I think creativity is key, and just inclusivity. So whether that's people working in the warehouse or the cooperage or the sales side of things or blending the whiskies, I think there's room for everyone in whisky, and there's lots of great examples of the younger generation coming into whisky, learning from those that worked in the distilleries and those that have worked to brands. It's very much a mix of different people, men and women working in the industry, and I think it's important to continue to champion that.
Yeah.